In the middle of a frozen American city, a Navy SEAL thought he was walking into just another quiet winter night. Then his silver German Shepherd stopped and refused to move. What they found buried in the snow was a man no one wanted alive. And when powerful people came back to erase their mistake, the dog made a choice that would decide who survived the night. This is not just a rescue. It's a story about loyalty, second chances, and why some bonds are stronger than fear. If you believe no one should ever be left behind, subscribe now and stay with us for this Navy SEAL rescue dog story. Anchorage, Alaska wore winter the way an old sailor wears a storm, without complaint, without ceremony, and with the quiet belief that survival is simply what you do. The city sat under a pale, hard daylight that never warmed anything, only revealed it. Rooftops buried in layered white, street lamps rimmed with frost, and wind carving long, shining ribbons of snow across empty lanes. The air was so cold it seemed to ring, like metal tapped with a knuckle. Even the distant mountains looked sharpened, their edges clean and bright against a sky the color of steel. In this kind of light, every breath showed itself, every mistake left a mark, and every living thing learned to move with purpose. Jack Miller moved that way too. He drove slowly along the plowed road toward the port district, hands steady on the wheel, eyes scanning the shoulders for black ice and stray drifts. At 35, Jack carried the kind of stillness people earned rather than inherited. He wasn't tall in a way that begged attention, but he was built like someone who had spent years making his body into a tool. Broad shoulders, dense muscle, and a posture that never fully relaxed. His face had sharp planes, high cheekbones, a straight nose that might have been broken once and healed slightly off, and a jawline dusted with a short, dark beard that looked more practical than stylish. His hair was kept close, dark brown with a few lighter strands at the temples, as if winter had started claiming him early. His eyes were a clear, cold blue, the kind that could look straight through a lie without raising their voice. He wore his Navy working uniform the way some men wore a wedding ring. Not for show, but because it reminded him who he had been when his life made more sense. The digital camouflage ran continuously across the jacket, front placket, chest area, pocket flaps, no solid panels anywhere, no breaks, no softness, as if the pattern itself refused comfort. It wasn't a costume, it was a habit, a skin. In Anchorage, nobody stared. Veterans were common enough, and winter made everyone mind their own business. Still, Jack's uniform carried a quiet gravity, like a hymn sung under the breath. He was headed to an old warehouse line near the docks, a place the city pretended was abandoned but never truly forgot. The Port Authority had contracts, and contracts had checklists, and checklists had names. Jack's name was on this one because he'd learned long ago that if you wanted something done right, you did it with your own hands, even if those hands had once done very different work in very different places. It had been 3 years since he'd left active duty. 3 years since the night that shaped his silence, the night a teammate didn't come home, and Jack did. The official report called it an operational loss. Jack called it a debt that would never be paid. It didn't make him cruel. It made him careful. It made him choose solitude the way some men chose whiskey, not because it tasted good, but because it burned enough to remind them they were still alive. In the passenger seat sat the only creature who had permission to break that solitude. A German Shepherd with a rare silver-gray coat, bright as ash under sunlight, darker along the spine where the hair thickened, and pale around the muzzle like he'd been dusted with frost at birth. His name was Ghost, a name that sounded like a joke until you watched him move. Quiet, clean, almost unreal, as if he slid through the world without disturbing it. He was 4 years old, large for his breed, with a deep chest and long legs built for snow, his paws splayed slightly for grip. His ears stood alert, triangular sails catching every sound, and his amber eyes held the steady intelligence that made people speak softer around him, even if they didn't know why. Ghost was not a pet. He was a companion forged from training, instinct, and something older than both, loyalty that didn't ask permission. Jack had found him at a military working dog transition program, a place where good dogs went when the world decided it didn't need them anymore. Ghost had been too sharp, too intense, too unwilling to just be a dog. Jack recognized the look. He signed the papers without hesitation. That had been a year ago. Since then, Ghost slept near Jack's bed, watched the windows when the wind got loud, and occasionally pressed his head against Jack's knee as if reminding him that breathing was a team sport. The truck rolled past a row of low industrial buildings, their corrugated sides gleaming in the flat winter sun. Snow sat on them in thick ledges. The port cranes in the distance looked like long-armed giants frozen mid-gesture. Wind kicked up powder that skated across the asphalt, swirling in playful spirals before vanishing. It was bright, almost painfully so, because fresh snow turned daylight into a mirror, and the sky reflected it back twice. A cruel kind of beauty, the kind that could blind you right before it killed you. Jack turned onto a service road, tires crunching through packed snow. Ahead, the old warehouse district loomed like a forgotten chapter of the city, long rectangles of shadow and ice, doors chained, windows opaque with frost, graffiti half buried under drifting white. The Port Authority claimed most of these buildings were empty. Jack didn't believe in empty places. Empty places were where trouble liked to nap. He parked near Warehouse 12, engine ticking as it cooled. The cold hit immediately when he opened the door, sharp, clean, and hungry. His breath smoked in the air. Ghost jumped down, landing with a soft thud, then circled once, nose low, reading the ground the way a librarian reads old ink. Jack grabbed a flashlight even though it was bright outside. Light in winter could be deceptive, and warehouses swallowed it whole. As he walked, his boots squeaked on snow, the sound crisp and lonely. The wind carried the faint scent of salt from the sea and diesel from the docks, mixed with the dry, sterile smell of ice. Ghost stayed close, shoulder near Jack's thigh, moving with a calm vigilance. If someone had been watching them, they would have seen a man in uniform and a silver dog cutting through a white landscape like a pair of moving shadows. Jack reached the side door, checked the lock, then used the port-issued key to open it. Inside, the air smelled of cold metal, old wood, and the faint ghost of fuel. Dust lay frozen on stacked pallets. Light came through high windows in pale beams, turning floating particles into glitter. Ghost stepped in, ears forward. Jack made a quick sweep, left to right, habit written into muscle. Nothing obvious moved. Still, Ghost's posture stiffened. A low rumble vibrated in his chest, not a bark, not yet. Jack paused. "What is it, boy?" His voice was quiet, controlled, the way you spoke in churches and war zones. Ghost didn't look at him. He was staring toward the far end of the building where a loading bay door stood half open, a narrow slit of white light cutting into the dim interior. The wind whistled through it like something breathing. Jack followed Ghost's gaze and felt that familiar tightening in his gut, the one that said the world had just shifted by half an inch. He moved forward, slow, angled, using stacks of crates as cover even though it felt ridiculous in a warehouse. Ghost padded beside him, silent. As they neared the loading bay, the brightness increased, snowlight pouring in like a flood. Jack lifted his flashlight anyway, sweeping the corners. Still nothing. Then Ghost stopped so suddenly, Jack almost bumped into him. The dog's hackles rose along his silver spine, turning him into a bristling ridge of fur. His lips peeled back slightly, revealing teeth not in aggression but warning. His rumble deepened. Jack lowered his center of gravity. "Easy," he murmured. "Show me." Ghost took one step, then another, slow and deliberate, as if the ground itself might bite. The loading bay opened to an alley between warehouses, a narrow corridor where snow had drifted high against the walls, bright and clean as a fresh bandage. The sun hit it directly, making it gleam. It looked harmless. That was what made Jack's skin prickle. In the middle of the alley, the snow was disturbed, not by wind, by weight. Jack stepped outside. The cold slapped his face. The alley funneled wind, making it howl softly. On the ground, a line of footprints cut through the drift, deep, uneven, and staggered. Human, one said only. No sign of a return path. Jack crouched, gloved hand hovering over the print. The edges were sharp, meaning they were fresh. He looked up and down the alley. At the far end, it dead-ended against a tall fence topped with frozen barbed wire. The fence was half buried in snow, but intact. To the left and right, warehouse walls rose like cliffs. No ladders, no open doors, no visible gaps. Ghost stood at Jack's side, staring down the trail, ears stiff, body angled forward as if his whole soul wanted to sprint. Jack's mind worked fast, fitting pieces together. One person came in here, one person didn't leave. That meant only two possibilities. They were still here, or they were gone in a way that didn't involve walking. Jack stood slowly. His breath clouded the air, then vanished. The brightness of the snow made his eyes narrow, but he forced himself to see every detail. The scuffed toe marks, the drag lines where someone had stumbled, a faint smear of darker ice that could have been dirt, or something else. Ghost let out one short, sharp huff, then moved forward 2 steps and stopped again, as if a line had been drawn across the alley only he could see. Jack's pulse remained steady, but he felt the old familiar voice in his head, the one that sounded like a drill instructor and a priest at the same time. Don't rush, don't assume, don't get sentimental. He followed the footprints to where they ended near the fence. There, the snow was churned up, as if the person had fallen or turned around in panic. Jack scanned the fence. No breaks, no cut wire, no climb marks, just the hard, indifferent metal and the white weight of winter pressing in. He turned, looking back toward the warehouse. The alley behind them was empty, bright and quiet. Too quiet. Ghost's rumble returned, lower, more urgent, and he stared not at the fence now, but at the snowbank piled against the right-hand wall, an innocent mound catching sunlight like sugar. Jack took a step toward it. The surface looked untouched except, not quite. A faint depression, shallow and uneven, like someone had pressed into it and the snow had tried to forget. Jack's humor flickered for a second, the kind of dark humor that kept soldiers sane. Winter, he thought, was the best criminal. It buried evidence with a smile. He moved closer, flashlight angled down. Ghost didn't move, but his body trembled with contained warning. Jack knelt, pressed a gloved hand to the depression. The cold soaked through instantly. Under the thin crust of snow, something was harder than packed drift. Not ice, not rock. Jack's hand paused. In the bright, indifferent daylight of Anchorage, with snow shining like a holy altar cloth, Jack Miller realized he was looking at a story that had already started without him. He glanced back at the footprints. One way in, no way out. He swallowed once, slow. All right, he said softly, to Ghost and to himself. We're in it now. Ghost's eyes didn't blink. The wind funneled through the alley like a warning whispered by an old god. Jack reached forward and began to clear snow with his hands, carefully, methodically, until the shape beneath started to suggest the outline of something human. Then his fingers brushed fabric, and in that same moment, from somewhere deeper in the warehouse district, faint as a memory but real as a threat, a distant engine note drifted on the wind, too far to see, too close to ignore. Jack froze, listening. Ghost's head lifted, ears cutting the air like blades. The footprints, the buried shape, the dead-end fence, and the distant sound all locked together into one chilling truth. Whoever came here didn't plan to leave, and whoever else was out there might be coming back to make sure of it. Jack didn't pull his hand away from the snow immediately. He stayed still, fingers numb against the buried shape, listening as the distant engine noise faded into the low, constant breath of the port. Anchorage had a way of swallowing sounds, especially in winter, as if the cold pressed them flat and hid them under layers of white. He straightened slowly, careful not to disturb the surface any more than he already had. Whatever lay beneath that drift could wait a few seconds longer. What mattered now was understanding the space around him, because spaces were honest if you knew how to read them. Ghost shifted beside him, silver-gray fur catching the harsh daylight, his body angled away from the alley as if urging Jack back toward the warehouse. The dog's nose dipped again, then lifted, testing the air. Jack trusted that instinct more than his own eyes. He stepped backward, boots crunching softly, and returned into the dim interior of Warehouse 12. Inside, the contrast hit hard. Outside was blinding white. Inside was a cathedral of cold shadows and pale light shafts cutting down from frosted windows high above. The air smelled faintly of rust and old oil, layered with something newer that didn't belong: sweat, fear, and the sharp tang of human breath trapped too long in enclosed space. Jack closed the loading bay door most of the way, leaving only a narrow slit of light, not enough to hide, but enough to control what came through. He turned, scanning deeper into the building. Ghost moved ahead now, posture low, tail steady, nose working in short, deliberate sweeps across the concrete floor. His nails clicked softly, then stopped. The dog froze near a row of metal storage cages stacked 2 levels high, the kind used for equipment crates decades ago. Jack followed, senses tightening. He noticed the snow first, not on the floor, but along the seam of a steel service door set into the far wall. Snow had been packed into the edges, not drifted. Someone had done it by hand, pressing it in to seal gaps, to insulate, to hide heat or sound. Jack's jaw set. That wasn't an accident. He approached the door slowly. It was industrial-grade steel, painted a dull gray that had chipped over time, revealing darker metal beneath. No signage, no handle on the outside, only a recessed latch that required a key or a very specific kind of leverage. Snow clung thickly around the frame, and frost spiderwebbed outward as if the door itself were trying to disappear into the wall. Ghost sat down abruptly, a signal Jack had learned to respect. The dog's ears were forward, eyes locked on the door. His breathing was controlled but heavy, a low rhythm that spoke of tension held in check. Jack crouched, placing his ear near the steel. At first, there was nothing but the hollow echo of the building and his own pulse. Then, faintly, a sound came through, so soft it might have been imagined. A scrape, metal against concrete. Jack's eyes narrowed. He shifted his weight, testing the door with one gloved hand. It was cold enough to bite through the insulation instantly. He pressed gently. The door did not move. He knocked once, hard enough to be heard but not enough to announce panic. The response came a heartbeat later. The door shuddered, just once, then again, weaker. Jack straightened slightly. "If someone's in there," he said, voice low and steady, "don't waste your strength." He paused, listening. The silence that followed was heavier than before, as if whatever was on the other side had retreated inward. Ghost let out a single, sharp huff through his nose, a sound Jack had heard only a few times before. Alert, precise, impatient. Jack stepped back, assessing. Forcing the door would be loud and slow. Calling for help would take time and raise questions he wasn't ready to answer. He glanced at the stacked cages, then at the steel latch. Years of training aligned into a simple decision. He moved quickly, using a pry bar from his truck kit, wedging it into the latch seam with careful pressure. Metal protested with a low groan. Jack leaned in, muscles in his shoulders tightening beneath the uniform. The camouflage pattern stretched but held, seamless and unbroken. The latch snapped with a sharp crack that echoed through the warehouse. Jack froze, counting seconds. No immediate response. He pulled the door open just enough to slip through, flashlight already in hand, beam cutting into the darkness beyond. The room inside was small and windowless, more like a maintenance cell than a storage space. The air was warmer than the warehouse by several degrees, stale and damp. In the center of the room sat a man slumped against the far wall, wrists bound in front of him with zip ties, ankles crossed and bruised. He was conscious, barely. His head lifted when the light hit his face, eyes squinting against the sudden brightness. He looked to be in his late 40s or early 50s, tall, even seated, with a lean frame that suggested strength worn down rather than absent. His hair was dark but thinning at the temples, plastered to his forehead with sweat despite the cold. A short, uneven beard shadowed his jaw, graying at the chin. His skin was pale, almost waxy, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. There was intelligence in his eyes, but it was dulled by exhaustion and pain. Jack took in the details automatically, the way the man favored his left side, the shallow rise and fall of his chest, the faint tremor in his hands. He was not a vagrant or a drunk who'd wandered into the wrong place. This man had been placed here. Ghost entered behind Jack, filling the doorway with silver bulk. The dog's presence drew an immediate reaction. The man stiffened, breath hitching, eyes widening not in fear but recognition of danger. Jack noted it. People who feared dogs panicked. People who understood predators respected distance. "Easy," Jack said again, more firmly this time, to both of them. He knelt a few feet away, keeping his movements slow. "What's your name?" The man swallowed, throat working. "Daniel Reed," he said hoarsely. His voice was rough, educated, American, with a faint trace of something Eastern, maybe Boston, maybe New York. "I didn't think anyone was coming." Jack didn't respond to that. "Why were you sealed in here?" Daniel let out a short, humorless breath that almost became a laugh. "Because snow covers mistakes," he said, "and warehouses don't ask questions." Jack studied him. There were marks on Daniel's jacket, civilian but expensive, insulated, the kind someone wore who expected to be outdoors briefly, not trapped overnight. A dark stain spread across the fabric near his ribs, old blood already frozen at the edges. Jack's expression didn't change, but something hardened behind his eyes. He reached out and cut the zip ties with a practiced flick of his knife. Daniel flinched anyway. "I'm not armed," Jack said quietly, "and neither is he." Ghost sat, unblinking, a silent contradiction. Daniel nodded once, stiffly. As the ties fell away, the building groaned, not loudly, just enough to remind them that the world outside still existed. Jack helped Daniel to his feet. The man swayed, caught himself against the wall. Up close, Jack could see the lines carved deep around Daniel's eyes, the kind left by years of concentration and nights without sleep. This was a man who lived in his head more than his body. "You're bleeding," Jack said. "Not bad," Daniel replied automatically, the reflex of someone used to downplaying damage. "They wanted me alive for a while." Jack glanced toward the door. Ghost had turned his head, ears pivoting toward the warehouse beyond. The dog's posture had changed, alert, listening, ready. Jack felt it too, the subtle shift in air pressure, the way sound carried differently when something large moved outside. He guided Daniel toward the doorway. "We're not staying here," Jack said. "Whoever put you in that room didn't do it to be kind." As they stepped back into the warehouse, the winter light slicing in through the cracked bay door seemed harsher than before. Ghost moved ahead, then stopped dead, body rigid. Jack followed his line of sight. The loading bay door trembled, just slightly. Snow sifted down from the frame. A muffled thump echoed from the other side, as if something, or someone, had leaned against it and then pulled away. Daniel's face drained of what little color it had left. "They're back," he whispered. The door shuddered once more, then it went still. The silence that followed was worse than noise, because it meant intent. Jack positioned himself between Daniel and the door, one hand resting near his sidearm. Ghost rose, teeth bared now, a low growl vibrating through his chest like distant thunder. Jack's mind calculated angles, exits, distances, one way in, one way out, and now, whatever had been buried under the snow outside was no longer the only problem. Jack reacted before the sound fully registered. The faint vibration that ran through the concrete floor was something his body recognized long before his mind named it. Engines. Not one, at least two. Heavy, controlled, the kind that didn't belong to lost drivers or curious dock workers, the kind that moved with intent. He lifted a hand slightly, palm down, and Ghost responded at once, lowering his stance, silver-gray body coiling with restrained force. The dog's teeth were still visible, lips drawn back not in frenzy but precision. Ghost was not afraid. He was measuring. Daniel Reed stood behind Jack, swaying, one hand pressed against his ribs, breath shallow. Up close, Jack noticed more details that confirmed his unease. Daniel's jacket was not just expensive. It was tailored, the shoulders reinforced, the seams double-stitched in a way common to protective or technical wear. His boots, though scuffed, were military-adjacent, civilian design, but built for long hours on hard ground. His hands, now free of the zip ties, bore old scars along the knuckles and a faint burn mark near the wrist, the kind left by electrical equipment rather than street accidents. Daniel was not helpless by nature. He had been reduced to helplessness deliberately. "Lights," Daniel whispered hoarsely, eyes flicking toward the loading bay. "They always come with lights." Jack did not ask how he knew. He already believed him. The warehouse groaned again, this time louder, as if the cold steel itself were reacting to what approached. Through the narrow gap in the bay door, a hard white beam sliced across the snow outside, then another, moving in slow arcs. Headlights, high-mounted. Jack's jaw tightened. He had seconds, not minutes. He guided Daniel deeper into the warehouse, toward a maze of stacked containers and old machinery. "You can walk?" Jack asked quietly. Daniel nodded once, too quickly. "I'll manage." Ghost moved ahead, then abruptly doubled back, planting himself in front of Daniel, blocking Jack's path. The dog's ears were pinned now, eyes locked on Daniel's face, his growl deeper, resonating in the chest. Jack stopped short. "Ghost," he warned softly. The dog didn't move. Daniel froze, hands half raised, breath caught. There was a flicker in his eyes then, something sharp, calculating, that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "He doesn't like me," Daniel said. Not accusatory, observational. "He knows something," Jack replied. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of engines outside and the faint hiss of wind through cracked metal. Jack studied Daniel carefully. "You said your name was Daniel Reed." "It is." "What do you do, Daniel?" Daniel hesitated just long enough to matter. "I design systems," he said finally. "On paper." Jack's eyes narrowed a fraction. "For who?" Before Daniel could answer, Ghost snapped, a single sharp bark that echoed off the warehouse walls like a gunshot. Jack spun, weapon half raised, but Ghost wasn't looking at the door anymore. He was staring at Daniel's jacket. The dog lunged forward, just enough to clamp his teeth onto the fabric near Daniel's side, ripping it open with a brutal tear. Daniel cried out, stumbling back. Jack grabbed Ghost by the harness, hauling him away with a surge of strength born from training and trust. "Enough," he hissed. The jacket fell open, revealing not skin, but a compact device strapped beneath Daniel's ribs. A black, rectangular unit no larger than a paperback book, its surface studded with tiny indicator lights, one of which pulsed faintly blue. The air in the warehouse seemed to thin. Daniel looked down at the exposed device, then back at Jack. The calculation was gone now, replaced by resignation. "It's not a bomb," Daniel said quickly. "It's a tracker." Jack's voice was flat. "Whose?" "Theirs." Jack tightened his grip on Ghost's harness, feeling the dog's muscles vibrating with fury. Ghost's amber eyes never left the device. "You let them put it on you," Jack said. "I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice," Daniel swallowed. "Not when the alternative is a shallow grave under frozen water." Outside, one of the engines cut, then another. Doors slammed. Voices carried faintly through the steel and snow. Men, confident, unhurried, the kind of men who believed time belonged to them. Jack made a decision. He reached out and tore the device free, wires snapping with a muted crackle. The blue light died instantly. Daniel exhaled sharply, as if a weight had been lifted from his chest that was more than physical. "They'll notice," Daniel said. "They already have," Jack replied. He shoved the dead tracker into a nearby crate and kicked it closed. "Now tell me why they want you alive." Daniel looked at Ghost, then at Jack. The dog's presence seemed to pin him in place more effectively than any weapon. "Because I built something that shouldn't exist," Daniel said quietly. "And because I tried to destroy it." Before Jack could press further, a new sound cut through the warehouse. Boots on concrete, crisp and deliberate. 3 sets, maybe 4. The headlights outside dimmed as someone cut them, plunging the bay into shadow. A man's voice called out, calm and amplified by the acoustics of steel and emptiness. "Daniel," the voice said, almost gently. "You're cold. Come back out." Jack recognized the tone instantly. Authority without strain, confidence born of habit. He shifted his weight, placing himself fully between the voice and Daniel. Ghost moved to Jack's side, shoulder brushing his leg, a living wall of silver muscle and intent. The footsteps grew closer. The man who emerged from behind the stacks was tall and broad, his silhouette filling the aisle between containers. He wore a heavy winter coat, dark and unmarked, fur-lined hood framing a face carved with sharp angles, and a neatly trimmed beard gone gray at the edges. His hair was dark blonde, slicked back despite the cold, and his eyes were pale, almost colorless, scanning the space with professional ease. He looked to be in his early 50s, the kind of man who had never doubted that the world would make room for him. 2 others flanked him, faces partially obscured by scarves, movements efficient, hands near their jackets. The leader smiled faintly when he saw Jack. "Didn't expect company," he said. His voice was smooth, almost friendly. "This area's restricted." Jack didn't return the smile. "So is kidnapping." The man chuckled softly. "Strong word." His gaze flicked briefly to Ghost, then back to Jack. "You're military," he said, not a question. "Former," Jack replied. "Then you understand," the man said. "Some people are liabilities. Some information doesn't age well." Daniel shifted behind Jack. "You said you'd let me go," he called out, anger breaking through his exhaustion. The man sighed, as if disappointed. "I said I'd move you somewhere safer." His eyes hardened. "You complicated that." Ghost growled, a sound that made the 2 men flanking the leader tense. The leader raised a hand slightly, palm out, never taking his eyes off Jack. "Easy," he said, echoing Jack's earlier word. "No need for this to get messy." Jack felt the familiar narrowing of the world, the way everything outside the immediate threat faded. Angles, distance, timing. He knew he could take 1, maybe 2, before the others reacted. He also knew Daniel wouldn't survive that exchange. Not here, not wounded. The leader took a step forward. Ghost stepped forward with him, teeth bared, body low and lethal. The leader stopped. For the first time, something like uncertainty flickered across his face. He glanced at Ghost again, then back at Jack. "That dog trained?" Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence stretched, brittle as ice. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and relentless, tapping against metal like a countdown. The leader smiled once more, thinner this time. "We'll finish this later," he said. He stepped back, gestured to his men. "Let's go." They retreated as smoothly as they had entered, footsteps fading into the cavernous warehouse. The engines roared back to life outside, then pulled away, headlights sweeping once more across the snow before vanishing. Jack didn't move until the sound was gone. Ghost remained rigid, eyes fixed on the darkness where the men had been. Daniel sagged against a crate, shaking now, adrenaline finally releasing its grip. "They'll come back," Daniel whispered. Jack looked down at Ghost, then at the sealed bay door, then at the dead tracker hidden in the crate. "I know," he said. He glanced toward the alley outside where something human lay buried under snow. "And when they do," he added quietly, "they won't be looking for a rescue." The engines returned, the way winter always did, without apology and with purpose. Jack felt them before he heard them, a low vibration threading through the concrete and into his bones. 3 pickup trucks rolled into the port lot, their tires crunching over packed snow with disciplined spacing, headlights dimmed to slits that cut rather than flooded. Professional. Not the swagger of criminals who liked to be seen, but the economy of men who preferred results. Jack moved at once, guiding Daniel deeper between stacked containers while Ghost flowed beside them like a living shadow, silver-gray fur catching the cold light in brief flashes. The snow outside reflected so fiercely that even through narrow gaps Jack could read silhouettes, count steps, measure distances. He used the brightness the way he'd once used moonlight in places far from Alaska, never trusting it, never wasting it. Daniel's breathing had gone shallow again, the pain in his ribs tightening his movements. But he followed without complaint, eyes alert now, focused. Whatever fear he carried had hardened into resolve, the kind born when a man realizes running isn't an option anymore. Jack chose a position behind a forklift carcass half buried in frost, a place with overlapping sight lines and 2 exits. He crouched Daniel low and pressed a gloved finger to his own lips. Ghost settled, chest to the ground, muscles coiled. Outside, doors opened, boots hit snow, voices stayed low, one laugh short and humorless. The men spread, flanking instinctively, their movements mirrored by years of shared drills. Jack recognized the rhythm, 1 forward element probing, 2 holding angles, 1 overwatch. He shifted slightly, checking the NWU jacket's fit, feeling the familiar reassurance of fabric that never lied. The digital camouflage broke his outline against steel and shadow, and he became what he'd trained to be, part of the environment rather than a guest in it. A shape moved near the bay door, blocking the reflected light for a heartbeat, then another. 3 men entered the warehouse with the calm confidence of those who believed the space already belonged to them. The leader came last. He hadn't changed clothes. Same dark winter coat, fur-lined hood framing a face that looked carved rather than grown. His name drifted into Jack's mind from nowhere in particular, the way names sometimes did when instincts lined up. Victor Hale. He carried himself like a man who had once worn a uniform and then decided the uniform was a suggestion rather than a rule. Tall, broad-shouldered, beard trimmed to precision, hair kept neat despite the cold. His eyes were pale and steady, the kind that measured risk without feeling it. Something in his posture hinted at a past incident, an injury perhaps, or a loss, that had taught him patience at the cost of mercy. The other 2 men were younger, faces partly hidden by scarves, rifles slung but ready. Their movements were clean, economical. Jack noted the absence of chatter. These weren't thugs, they were contractors. Ghost's ears twitched, then flattened. The dog's body tightened, a low vibration rising from his chest, not loud enough to give them away but unmistakable to Jack. Ghost had caught a scent, not fresh diesel or gun oil, but something older, layered beneath, the ghost of a memory. Jack felt it then too, a tightening in his gut that had nothing to do with the present. Victor Hale paused near the containers, lifted his head slightly, and breathed in. "He's here," he said softly. Not a guess. A conclusion. One of the younger men nodded, scanning the shadows. "Tracker's dead," he murmured. Victor's mouth curved just enough. I know. He stepped forward, boots echoing once, twice. Daniel, he called, voice smooth and unhurried. You're bleeding again. This ends better if you don't make me look. Daniel shifted behind the forklift, anger flickering across his features. Jack placed a steadying hand on Sarah's shoulder, feeling the tremor beneath. Ghost's growl deepened. Victor's gaze snapped to the sound. He froze, eyes narrowing, then focused on the darkness where Jack and Ghost hid. For the first time, Victor's confidence wavered, not fear, but recognition. That dog, he said quietly. I know that dog. Jack's jaw tightened. The memory surfaced like a shard of ice breaking water. 2 years ago, Northern Training Grounds, a joint exercise gone wrong. A silver shepherd had been there, younger then, leaner, eyes already too intelligent for comfort, a handler who pushed too hard, a correction that became cruelty. Jack had intervened, words had been exchanged, careers had diverged. Victor's lips thinned as the past settled into place. You took him, Victor said. Not a question. Ghost's growl rose, teeth bared now, the sound vibrating through the metal bones of the warehouse. The younger men shifted uneasily. Dogs they understood. This dog, perhaps not. Victor lifted a hand, palm out. Easy, he said again to the men this time. He remembers. Jack stepped forward into the light, making a choice. The snow's reflected glare painted his uniform in stark contrast, the digital pattern breaking and reforming as he moved. He stood tall, shoulders squared, eyes level. You shouldn't be here, Jack said. Victor's gaze flicked to the NWU, then back to Jack's face. Neither should you. You're wrong, Jack replied. I live here. A faint chuckle escaped Victor. So do I, just not officially. He took another step, then stopped as Ghost surged forward a half pace, muscles bunching, ready. Victor's eyes dropped to the dog, then lifted again. Still protective, he observed. Still loyal. Jack felt the old anger stir, controlled but present. You taught him that, Jack said. You taught him what to guard against. Victor's smile vanished. The warehouse hummed with tension, a wire pulled too tight. Outside, snow began to fall harder, the flakes thick and bright, reflecting light back into the bay until shadows danced. Jack used the shimmer to watch hands, shoulders, the subtle shifts that preceded violence. One of the younger men inhaled sharply, a tell. Victor noticed, shook his head almost imperceptibly. Not today, Victor said. We don't need noise. He turned his attention back to Daniel, who now stood straighter, pain giving way to defiance. You built a thing, Victor continued, voice carrying easily. A clever thing. And clever things attract people who want to use them. Daniel swallowed. And people who deserve to be stopped. Victor shrugged. Morality is a luxury. Ghost snarled, a sound that carried the weight of memory, of chains and commands, and the day Jack had cut them away. Victor's eyes hardened. You always did get attached, he said to Jack. To causes, to animals, to men who think they can rewrite rules. Jack didn't blink. Rules change, he said. People decide when. Victor studied him for a long moment, then nodded, as if conceding a minor point. Fair. He gestured to his men. Sweep the back. They hesitated, glancing at Ghost, then obeyed. Jack adjusted his stance, ready to move if they pressed too far. The sweep was quick, professional. The men returned, shaking their heads. Victor exhaled through his nose. Looks like you've bought him some time, he said to Jack. Enjoy it. He stepped back toward the bay, snow swirling around his boots. We'll collect what's ours, he added. Tonight or another. Jack held his gaze. You won't. Victor smiled, thin and cold. We'll see. The truck's engines roared again, louder now, confident. Headlights swept the warehouse one last time, catching Ghost's eyes and making them burn like amber coals. Then the vehicles were gone, swallowed by white. The silence that followed felt fragile, as if the building itself were listening. Daniel let out a breath he'd been holding for too long and sank back against the forklift. Jack remained standing, scanning, counting seconds, trusting the aftersound more than the quiet. Ghost paced once, then returned to Jack's side, pressing his shoulder against Jack's leg in a brief grounding contact. The dog's fur was warm despite the cold, alive with tension that slowly eased. Jack knelt, meeting Ghost's eyes. You did good, he murmured. Ghost's ears lifted, tail giving a single, controlled sweep. Daniel watched them, something like wonder cutting through his exhaustion. He knows them, Daniel said softly. Jack nodded. He knows who they are. He glanced toward the alley, toward the buried shape under snow, toward the choices narrowing ahead. The men had left, but the hunt had not. Somewhere in the falling white, Victor Hale was already adjusting plans. Jack rose, shoulders squaring once more. We move, he said. Now! Ghost turned toward the exit, senses sharp, memory awake. The snow outside gleamed brighter, as if inviting them into a different kind of trap. They moved before the quiet could settle into something dangerous. Jack led them out through a side corridor of the warehouse, past a line of rusted lockers and a service stair that smelled of old salt and cold iron. Snowlight bled through cracked windows, turning every breath into a white plume. Outside, Anchorage held its breath, streets muffled, the harbor cranes standing like sentinels carved from frost. Ghost took point, head low, ears pivoting, the silver gray of his coat flashing and vanishing as he crossed patches of glare. Daniel followed, favoring his side, jaw clenched against pain, but there was a new steadiness to his step. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was preparing to speak. Jack didn't like that feeling. Men who prepared speeches in moments like this were often rehearsing lies or confessions, and both carried weight. They ducked into a covered loading alcove where the wind cut less sharply. Jack checked the angles, then nodded once. Talk, he said. Daniel leaned against the concrete, sliding down until he sat, knees bent. He was tall, even seated, long-limbed, his frame wiry rather than muscular, the kind shaped by years of standing over drafting tables and lab benches instead of gym mirrors. His face, now that color had returned, showed a precise symmetry. Sharp cheekbones, a narrow mouth, eyes a dark hazel that flicked constantly as if cataloging variables. The faint burn scar at his wrist caught the light again. Daniel noticed Jack looking and smiled without humor. Oscilloscope mishap, he said. I don't always win arguments with machines. Jack remained silent. Ghost sat beside him, gaze fixed on Daniel, posture alert but no longer hostile. The dog's breathing slowed, but his eyes never softened. I was a military systems engineer, Daniel said. Not weapons, not directly. Control architecture, fail-safes, kill-switch logic. He paused, swallowing. I designed how things stop when they shouldn't go on. Jack's eyes narrowed a fraction. Then why are people trying to erase you? Daniel exhaled. Because someone decided the stop didn't need to exist. Snow drifted past the opening, bright as torn paper. Daniel continued, voice steadier now. 3 years ago, I was contracted, off the books, to audit a winterized test platform, autonomous, long range, meant to operate where humans couldn't, Arctic conditions, communications denied environments. Jack felt a familiar chill unrelated to temperature. He had been in places where machines replaced judgment and paid for it with blood. My job, Daniel said, was to ensure it could be shut down remotely and locally. Redundancies layered on redundancies. If a sensor failed, another took over. If command went dark, it defaulted to safe. He laughed softly, a sound like ice cracking. Except the directive changed. Jack watched his mouth, his eyes, the micro-hesitations that betrayed stress rather than deception. Who changed it? Daniel hesitated. Again, just enough to matter. A private consortium with public friends, he said. They wanted persistence, not autonomy, obedience. A system that didn't ask permission to continue. Ghost's ears lifted at the word continue, as if it carried a tone animals understood better than men. Jack shifted his weight. You signed off? No, Daniel said quickly. I objected, documented, escalated. That's when the pressure started. He rubbed his ribs, wincing. Threats framed as incentives. Incentives framed as patriotism. Jack had heard that music before. What did you do? Daniel met his gaze. I copied everything. Jack's jaw tightened. Where? Daniel smiled faintly. Everywhere. Encrypted shards seeded across systems that don't talk to each other, unless you tell them how. He leaned his head back against the concrete. I built the map. Without me, it's noise. Jack considered the words. A map meant leverage. Leverage meant bait. You think they want you alive to finish the map, Jack said. They want me alive to delete it, Daniel corrected, or to rewrite it so it leads nowhere. Snow thickened, the flakes larger now, falling straight down as if the wind had stepped aside to listen. Ghost stood suddenly, head snapping toward the open street. Jack followed the line of sight, then relaxed a notch. Just a plow, far off, its amber light blinking. The city kept breathing. Daniel watched the exchange with interest. He listens for what isn't there, Daniel said. You trained him that way. Jack didn't answer. He was thinking about Victor Hale, about recognition and the weight of unfinished business. You could be lying, Jack said at last. Daniel nodded. You should assume I am. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket and withdrew a slim metal case, no larger than a deck of cards. He set it on the ground between them, palms open. This is why I'm not. Jack didn't touch it. What is it? A key, Daniel said. Not the data. The door. Jack crouched, examining the case without opening it. No markings, no ports visible. You carry this around? Daniel shrugged. Habit. Jack's eyes flicked up. Habit gets people killed. So does trust, Daniel replied quietly. The tension stretched, then eased, not resolved but acknowledged. Jack stood. We're not staying here, he said. You'll come with me. Daniel nodded. I assumed. They moved again, cutting through back streets glazed with ice. Jack chose routes with long sightlines and easy exits, the NWU blending him into shadow and snow. Ghost ranged ahead, then back, then ahead again, a pendulum of vigilance. Daniel kept pace better now, the adrenaline smoothing edges. As they walked, he spoke in fragments. Test sites shuttered overnight, files sealed with language so vague it could hide a war, names that mattered only because of the power behind them. Jack filed it all away. He had learned not to react to first revelations. Truth often arrived in layers, and the outer ones were designed to distract. They reached a low-slung building near the waterfront, a bait shop closed for winter, windows boarded, sign half buried. Jack unlocked the side door with a key that had seen more winters than he cared to count. Inside, the air smelled of wood and old nets. A space heater hummed to life, pushing back the cold just enough to make fingers work. Daniel sank onto a bench, shoulders slumping. Ghost circled once, then lay near the door, chin on paws, eyes never fully closing. Jack poured water from a thermos and handed it to Daniel. If this is a trap, Jack said, it's a patient one. Daniel took a sip, then another. It isn't, he said, but it could become one. Jack studied him. You're waiting for something. Daniel's mouth twitched. I'm waiting for confirmation. As if summoned by the words, a vibration buzzed softly. Daniel froze. His hand moved to his jacket, then stopped. The sound came again, short, insistent. Jack's eyes went to the phone Daniel drew out, an old slab of glass and metal, edges worn, screen dark until it lit. No bars, no carrier. The heater hummed. Snow whispered against boards. Ghost's head lifted, ears pricked. Daniel stared at the screen as if it were a mirror reflecting a life he thought he'd buried. That's not possible, he whispered. Jack's voice was low. What is it? Daniel swallowed. It shouldn't ring, he said. There's no signal. The phone vibrated again, harder this time, the sound loud in the small room. Jack felt the shift, the click of a lock turning somewhere out of sight. Whatever Daniel had built did not depend on towers. It depended on paths. He reached out, not to take the phone, but to steady Daniel's wrist. Answer it, Jack said. Daniel hesitated, then slid his thumb across the screen. The vibration stopped. Silence rushed in to fill the space it left. Ghost rose, hackles lifting, a low growl beginning as if he could hear something the rest of them could not. Daniel lifted the phone to his ear, eyes wide, breath caught. Hello? He said. The heater hummed, the snow fell, and somewhere beyond the walls, the city listened. The phone went dark without a word. Daniel lowered it slowly, as if setting down something fragile that might shatter if handled too roughly. The heater hummed on, steady and useless against the sudden sense of exposure that filled the bait shop. Jack didn't ask who had called. He didn't need to. Ghost was already on his feet, silver-gray fur bristling, nose lifted, ears slicing the air in sharp angles. The dog let out a low, warning growl that tightened Jack's spine. Outside, the city shifted, not with sound at first, but with absence, the way snow-dampened anchorage usually swallowed noise, now holding it, as if making room. Then came the first bark. Distant, high-pitched. Not Ghost. Another answered it, then another, the chorus spreading through the streets like a crack in ice. Jack moved instantly. "They've cut us loose," he said. "Which means they're close." Daniel's face had gone pale again, but his eyes were clear. "Hounds," he said. "They use hounds." Jack nodded once. "We move." They burst out into the street just as a bank of headlights flared at the far end of the block. Snow reflected the light into a blinding white wash, flattening shadows, exposing every movement. Jack cursed softly. Snow was honest. It gave nothing away and took nothing back. Ghost surged ahead, a silver streak against the white, then cut sharply left, forcing Jack and Daniel into a side street lined with shuttered storefronts. The barking grew louder, closer now, echoing off brick and steel. Jack could hear the cadence, trained dogs, not feral, their voices layered with discipline. He ran low, boots biting into packed snow, one hand steadying Daniel when the man faltered. Ghost doubled back, then darted forward again, choosing paths where glare was worst, where reflections confused depth and distance. He knew this terrain now, the way light betrayed, the way sound bounced. He was not fleeing blindly, he was shaping the chase. The first hound appeared at the corner ahead, a dark, powerful shape with a thick neck and broad chest, its coat a muddy black-brown that swallowed light. It skidded on the ice, snarled, corrected. Ghost met it head-on, a flash of silver and teeth, feinting just enough to draw it offline. Jack felt the air shift as the animals collided, heard the sharp snap of jaws. Ghost disengaged instantly, pivoting and sprinting, leading the hound away from Daniel's path. More hounds poured into the street. 3, then 5, large, muscular, their handlers' commands carrying faintly behind them. Jack's lungs burned. He risked a glance back and saw the trucks again, creeping, herding, headlights cutting corridors through the snow. Victor Hale had turned the city into a funnel. Ghost broke right, then left, then straight into a narrow pedestrian lane strung with frozen lights. The glare intensified, reflections turning the ground into a mirror. Jack followed, momentum carrying him faster than he liked. A hound lunged, missed, slid into a post with a meaty thud. Ghost leapt, landed on a low wall, then dropped back down, changing elevation just long enough to break the pack's rhythm. Jack's boot hit a patch of black ice hidden beneath powdered snow. The world tilted. He went down hard, shoulder first, the impact driving air from his chest in a sharp grunt. His sidearm skidded from his grip, spinning across the ice, disappearing under a drift. Daniel shouted his name, stumbled. Ghost wheeled instantly, planting himself between Jack and the oncoming hounds, silver fur spiked, teeth bared. The nearest hound lunged. Ghost met it with controlled fury, snapping, sidestepping, refusing to be dragged into a clinch. Jack pushed himself up on one elbow, vision swimming, snow stinging his cheek. He reached for the weapon and found only ice. The barking was everywhere now, the sound of it filling the streets, bouncing, multiplying. Jack forced himself to his knees, then to his feet, pain flaring down his arm. He locked eyes with Ghost for half a heartbeat. The dog held the line, buying seconds with muscle and instinct. Jack grabbed Daniel's sleeve. "Run," he said. Daniel hesitated, then ran, boots slipping, arms windmilling. Jack turned back just as Ghost broke contact, darting past him, shoulder brushing Jack's leg, a command without words. "Follow." They ran. Snow swallowed distance. Glare erased edges. The hounds pressed, relentless, but Ghost kept them guessing, doubling back, crossing their paths, using light and sound as weapons. Jack's breath tore at his chest, his shoulders screamed, and somewhere behind them engines revved. The city had become a maze of white corridors and glassy turns, every choice amplified by reflection. Jack vaulted a low barrier, landed badly, nearly fell again. His weapon was gone. The hunt was on, and the only thing between them and capture was a silver dog who remembered how to survive men. Jack stopped running because the city told him to. Anchorage had a voice when it wanted to be heard, and right now it spoke through the hard, honest scrape of wind across ice and the brittle echo of barking that had begun to fracture, losing cohesion as Ghost pulled the pack into confusion. Jack planted his boots wide on a stretch of frozen pavement between two warehouse blocks, breath tearing at his lungs, pain ringing down his shoulder where he'd hit the ground. The NWU jacket clung to him, digital camouflage catching and breaking the reflected glare until his outline dissolved into the cold geometry of the street. He turned, slow and deliberate, facing the direction the trucks would come from, knowing they would. Ghost returned to his side, chest heaving, silver-gray coat dusted white, a thin line of blood along his muzzle where a hound's tooth had grazed him. The dog pressed his shoulder against Jack's thigh, a living brace, amber eyes bright and unflinching. Daniel stumbled in behind them, bent forward, hands on knees, breath rasping. Jack raised a hand without looking back. "Stay," he said. Daniel obeyed, because fear had finally clarified into understanding. Running forever was another kind of death. Headlights slid around the corner like knives, then slowed, then stopped at a respectful distance. Victor Hale stepped out first, coat buttoned, breath barely visible, posture easy. He looked unchanged by the chase, as if movement were optional for him. Two men followed, one on either side, rifles lowered but ready. Behind them, the hounds milled, handlers keeping tight control now, tension leashed. Victor's gaze went to Ghost, then to Jack's empty hands. "You lost something," Victor said mildly. Jack didn't answer. He felt the city watching, windows black and blind, snow bright as a witness. "You know why this keeps happening," Victor continued. "You interfere, you attach, you think standing still makes you righteous." Jack's jaw tightened. He remembered another night, another place, when running had seemed like the only way to save someone and had only delayed the inevitable. He had carried that lesson like shrapnel ever since. "I'm done repeating," Jack said. Victor smiled, thin and amused. "That's what you said last time." Ghost growled, a low, controlled sound that vibrated through Jack's bones. Victor's eyes flicked down. "Easy," he told his men, then looked back at Jack. "You step aside, I take Daniel, and this ends." Jack shifted his weight, squaring himself fully, the NWU pattern settling as if it belonged there. "It doesn't end," he said. "It just moves." Victor shrugged. "Movement is progress." Jack shook his head once. "Movement without conscience is just momentum." Victor's expression cooled. "You always did confuse the two." The hounds strained, nails scraping ice. One of Victor's men, a compact figure with a scar splitting his eyebrow, adjusted his grip, impatience leaking through discipline. Jack noted it, filed it away. He felt Ghost's breathing steady beside him, felt the dog's readiness like a second spine. "If we run," Jack said quietly, "you hunt. If we hide, you wait. So we stop." Victor studied him for a long moment, measuring. "You're unarmed." Jack didn't deny it. "You're not," he added. Victor's lips curved. "That's the world." Jack glanced at Daniel, who stood upright now, face drawn but resolute, hands clenched. "Not tonight," Jack said. Somewhere, faint but real, a siren wailed. Not close, not yet. Victor heard it too. His eyes narrowed a fraction. "You're buying time," he said. "Time buys options," Jack replied. Ghost stepped forward half a pace, placing himself fully between Jack and Victor, teeth bared but body still, the picture of contained force. Victor's gaze softened with something like regret. "He's a fine animal," he said. "He deserved better than your sentiment." Jack's voice dropped. He deserved a choice. The wind gusted, sending snow skittering across the street, erasing footprints even as they formed. The siren rose, then fell, still distant. Victor weighed the street, the light, the witnesses that could appear at any moment. He lifted a hand, palm out, a universal pause. "This isn't over," he said. Jack met his eyes. "It is for tonight." Victor nodded once, accepting the smaller truth. He gestured, and the men backed away, handlers tightening leads. The trucks idled, then pulled back, retreating into the white. The hounds went reluctantly, voices fading. Jack didn't move until the sound was gone. He felt the cold settle, the pain assert itself, the city breathe again. Ghost leaned into him, grounding, steady. The siren grew louder, still blocks away. Jack exhaled, long and slow. He had chosen to stand. The cost would come later. For now, the street was theirs. Morning arrived quietly, the way truth often does, without sirens, without speeches, simply by refusing to stay hidden any longer. Anchorage woke under a pale winter sun that softened the edges of the city, turning the night's chaos into something almost ordinary. Snow still covered everything, but now it reflected warmth instead of threat, a clean brightness that revealed rather than concealed. Jack stood on a rise above the harbor, the NWU digital camouflage stretching seamlessly across his frame, unmoving in the cold breeze. He watched as official vehicles clustered below, their markings plain and unmistakable. This time, the engines belonged to people who would write reports instead of erasing them. Daniel Reed sat inside one of those vehicles, wrapped in a thermal blanket, posture straighter than it had been all night. In daylight, he looked older, late 40s, edging toward 50, with a gauntness that came not from hunger but from years of vigilance. His dark hair was streaked with gray at the temples now, his beard trimmed by a medic's hand rather than his own. His eyes, though still sharp, carried relief tempered by caution, like a man who knew safety was conditional. He spoke calmly to a federal agent with a notebook already half-filled. The data had moved faster than Victor Hale ever anticipated. Daniel's fragments, once scattered by design, had found their way together through channels Victor couldn't fully control. Oversight committees that still remembered their mandate, journalists who understood systems enough to ask the right questions, prosecutors who had waited years for something solid. By the time the sun rose, warrants had followed. Victor Hale was taken quietly, the way he preferred operations to run, his composure intact, even as cuffs closed around his wrists. He met Jack's gaze once across the snow. There was no anger in it now, only a thin acknowledgement of choice made and cost paid. The men who followed him went the same way, their efficiency useless without shadows to hide in. Ghost stood beside Jack, silver-gray coat glowing in the morning light, ears relaxed for the first time since the hunt began. The thin cut on his muzzle had been cleaned and closed with a strip of medical tape. It did nothing to dull the intensity in his amber eyes. He watched everything, but his body language had shifted from combat to guard, a sentinel at ease. When Daniel was escorted past, he paused, meeting Jack's eyes. "They'll want statements," Daniel said quietly. "Testimony." Jack nodded once. "You should give it." Daniel hesitated. "You won't?" Jack shook his head. "My part's done." Daniel studied him for a moment, then extended a hand. Jack took it, the grip firm and brief. "For what it's worth," Daniel said. "You chose the harder line." Jack released his hand. "It's the only one that holds." The agents moved Daniel along, doors closing with a muted thud. Paperwork would follow, months of it, hearings and headlines that would reduce nights like the last one into paragraphs and footnotes. The truth would come out in pieces, stripped of names that didn't need to be known. Jack preferred it that way. A woman approached him then, her steps careful on the ice. She wore a long wool coat cinched at the waist, dark blue against the white, and sturdy boots dusted with snow. She was in her early 40s, tall and slender, with ash blonde hair pulled into a practical knot at the nape of her neck. Her skin was fair, weathered slightly at the eyes in the way of someone who spent long hours looking at difficult things. Her gaze was direct, but not unkind. "Jack Miller?" she asked. "Sarah Collins, Federal Oversight." Her voice was steady, practiced. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had learned to navigate rooms full of men who underestimated her. A thin scar traced her jawline, pale against her skin, a remnant of an accident years ago that had left her cautious but unafraid. Jack nodded. "You're the one who signed off on the warrants." "I signed off on the questions," Sarah replied. "The answers did the rest." She glanced at Ghost, who regarded her calmly. "Beautiful dog." "Smart dog," Jack corrected gently. Sarah smiled at that. "They usually are." She shifted her weight. "There will be inquiries, internal and otherwise. People will want your version." Jack looked past her to the water, where ice drifted slowly, breaking and reforming as tides dictated. "My version's simple," he said. "I found someone who needed help. I helped." Sarah studied him, then nodded. "That's often enough," she said. She handed him a card. "If you change your mind." Jack accepted it without comment. When she turned away, Ghost's tail gave a single lazy sweep, approval granted. The vehicles began to disperse. The harbor resumed its ordinary rhythm. Jack felt the tension ease from his shoulders, the familiar ache settling in, a reminder of falls taken and choices made. He turned away from the scene and started down the path that led back toward the quieter parts of the city. Ghost fell into step beside him, shoulder to knee, their strides aligning naturally. They walked without hurry. Snow crunched softly underfoot, the sound clean and honest. As they passed rows of modest houses and closed shops, a few people glanced their way, registering the uniform, the dog, then moving on. No one stopped them. No one needed to. The sun climbed higher, its light warming the white expanse, softening it until it felt less like a barrier and more like a canvas wiped clean. Jack thought of the years ahead, unremarkable perhaps, but earned. He would check the docks, walk the streets, listen when the city spoke. Ghost would be there, alert and steady, a constant presence that asked nothing more than honesty. They reached a stretch of road where the snow had been plowed into neat banks, revealing dark asphalt beneath. Jack paused for a moment, breathing in the cold air, letting it fill his lungs, then he continued on. Behind them, the city carried on, the truth settling into place like snow melting into the ground. Some things didn't need monuments, some guardians did their work and walked away. In the winter light of Anchorage, a man in digital camouflage and a silver-gray German shepherd moved forward together, leaving no footprints that mattered. Sometimes the miracle doesn't arrive as thunder or fire from the skies, sometimes it comes quietly, in the form of a loyal dog that refuses to leave, a stranger who chooses to stand instead of run, or a moment where truth survives when lies were meant to bury it. Perhaps that is how God works most often, not by changing the whole world at once, but by placing one soul in the exact place it is needed, at the exact moment when hope is about to disappear. In our daily lives, we may never face a frozen street or a hunted night like Jack did, but we all face moments where doing the right thing feels lonely, costly, or unseen. And yet every small act of courage, every choice to protect instead of turn away, is a quiet prayer answered through action. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that goodness still walks beside us, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4, please share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from and what this story meant to you. And if you believe, as we do, that no one should ever be left behind, please subscribe to this channel and walk with us through more stories of loyalty, faith, and second chances. May God bless you, may He watch over your family, and may He send light into every winter you are walking through. Amen.